Hey, what's up everybody? Jason here. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for checking it out. So full disclosure, no, I do not have this kit yet, so don't leave angry comments. It just came out a half an hour ago, and I wasn't lucky enough to get one because all of my strike videos only have a few 100,000 views on it. So, sad me. Anyway, like and subscribe, and maybe that'll change and they'll send me new kits in the future. But I was scrolling through my news feed, and apparently a couple of stores leaked this a few hours early. So I saw something in my feed that says, get the new Alesis Strata Prime kit at our store at musicboutique.net or .org or something. And checked it out. And yes, they were already selling it before Alesis had anything on their website. There was no information, no Google searches, no nothing. Now they did do a couple of preview videos, which were very odd because they showed playing examples, but they didn't talk about the drums at all, which was kind of nuts. I'm sure those videos are probably flooding right now. They probably had an embargo set for noon today when all that stuff came out. But I owned the Strike Pro for about 4 years. I sold it about 6-7 months ago. So this video, I'm going to break down what's different between them and what this new flagship competes with. Okay, for starters, I used my Strike Pro 90% of the time for recording. And the other 10% was just practicing, playing along with music, or using it when we would do acoustic shows. I would bring the kick, the snare, and one cymbal, either just a crash or just the top hi-hat pad to do some percussion, but the vast majority was for recording. So a few of the things that were sticking points with the Strike Pro for me was sometimes the module was laggy. So I think you were limited to 200 meg as the size for the kits. So if you tried to load all of the highest quality samples into a kit, it just wouldn't work. Or there'd be a bunch of lag between switching between kits. If you had a whole bunch of maxed out kits loaded, you could take, I don't know, 15, 20, sometimes 30 seconds to switch between them. The other thing with the module was there was no audio over USB. So I would have to use the individual outputs to do the recording. So that means I needed an audio interface with 8 inputs. And even then, all the toms would get routed through a stereo pair and all the cymbals through a stereo pair. So you're left with 8 tracks in your DAW, and you can't individually mix or control the individual toms and the individual cymbals, which is kind of annoying. Quality was a big problem for Alesis off the get-go, so I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get into the price of this beast, because that might be a prohibitor for some. The snare trigger inside of my snare cracked, like a lot of people have reported. So I was playing one day and there was either no sound or really bad hot spotting, and the plastic plate that had the trigger cones on it actually snapped. I had to glue it back in place. Apparently they fixed it with the Strike Pro SE module or model, but even so, to have those types of quality problems might make a flagship model a hard sell. Also, my edge sensor on my hi-hat stopped working after probably 2.5 years. I ended up replacing it with a VH10, so that might be a bit of a challenge as well. If I really had to nitpick, I would say the rack wasn't very sturdy, because when you add all of the cymbals and drums onto it, it just was kind of rickety and it didn't feel very stable. It never fell over, obviously, but it wasn't as stable as some of the other racks that I've seen. All right, so I'm going to talk about what is different with this new kit, what you get in the box, the price, and then whether or not I think this would be a good upgrade. So first of all, the module is the biggest difference. The mixer is gone from the front in favor of a full color touchscreen, which is cool. You've got your audio controls up at the top, which is nice. You've got your main outputs. I'll get into the connections on the back in a second. Your auxiliary input adjust and your headphone adjust. So the previous module, the aux in, was a little tiny knob on the back, and the headphone volume adjust was on the front where the headphone jacks are. It's nice that they're all in the same spot. You've got the same controls you had in the previous one for when you are doing some recording, when you want to turn the metronome on and off and set your tempo and toggle between your kits. The biggest change would be these multifunction knobs on the front that they're calling small encoders, I believe, which is weird. Either way, the 6 of these will control the 6 settings you see at the bottom of the screen, and because it's a touch screen, if you're on a page that has more than 6 settings, you can actually swipe back and forth and adjust everything right there, which is pretty cool. So with a new multi-core processor, that's probably a welcome change because they have crammed a ton of stuff into this. I think they said something crazy like 75 kits, 440 kit pieces and over 1,000 sound articulations. So there's more than 215,000 individual samples. So 40 gig worth of stuff crammed onto this. Now, I'm not a big fan of all of the sounds that were in the Strike Pro. There was, I maybe used 10% of the sounds, but I think this is a case of more equates to better. So if you can put a big number like 215,000 on your website, people are going to be like, yeah, I'm going to get this that has the most. But with the way MIDI is nowadays, doesn't really matter because you can get all those sounds using MIDI plugins and stuff like that too. All right, so checking out the back of the module, the biggest update is the main outputs. So now you can output this to the house board if you're playing live, and you've got assignable outputs here, which is cool. So you can create additional mixes and route them separately. So the module now has routing, which the Roland modules have had for a while, and I do believe the F-Note ones have these as well. You can route pads to different outputs, and maybe you could send your main output to the house board, and then you could have an additional mix through the assignable outs for a different headphone mix for yourself or something like that. So that is pretty cool. You've got your same trigger inputs that you had on the previous one. You still have your SD card slot for loading stuff in, and then you've got your USB ports. Now, because the module does have Wi-Fi now and Bluetooth, you can update the firmware over Wi-Fi, but there is a USB port where you can plug a stick into to do the firmware update as well. And you've got your MIDI in and outputs on the back as well. So one thing to note about the Bluetooth capability, the manual does say that it supports Bluetooth, but if your device is Bluetooth audio only, it might not be detected. So that's telling me that you can't use your phone to play music through it over Bluetooth and play along with it. You'd have to use the auxiliary inputs, or you'd have to use a feature in the module where you can upload WAV files and MP3s and stuff like that, and you can actually store those within the module to play along with. So that's a bit of a bummer. So I'm not going to go into great details about the routing and the other features in the module, but let's just say they've caught up to Roland. So they have now added ambience, and they've also added microphones. So you can assign microphones to your cymbals and to your pads, and you can add ambience, whereas the Strike Pro really only had effects for all the individual pads and cymbals and the whole kit. So you could add reverb and compression and delay, but now you can add more things with ambience and mic controls, which is actually pretty cool. All right, so what do you get in the box? You get everything you see on the screen except for the hi-hat stand and the kick pedal, which is common because I believe Roland does the exact same thing. I think they give you a snare stand now. They might not give you any stands, but either way, you've got to get your own hi-hat stand, you've got to get your own kick pedal. And now, even with the low-end Alesis products, they're giving you a 90-day subscription to Drumeo. They give you that with this as well, and you also get the BFD desktop application for your computer to modify the sounds and load sounds in and out of the Strike module, which is cool. So the main differences with the pads is you can see the footprint is probably exactly the same as the Strike Pro. The pad sizes are the same, but the depth is a lot more shallow. So hopefully it's not as heavy, which will make the rack a little bit more stable. Eyeballing it, it looks like the rack is the same. It's just painted black, but the shell depth is definitely it looks to be about half the depth of the previous ones, or maybe 3/4 depth of the previous ones. So hopefully they'll be a little bit lighter. They do say that they do have some different triggering technology. They've got patented anti-hotspot sensor design, but they don't go into any details about the actual sensors themselves. Perhaps the biggest difference is the cymbals. They're all 360 triggering. They're all 3-zone now, so you get the bell, the bow, and the edge, which is pretty cool. And the crash and the ride and the hi-hats also have dual edge sensors. Now the biggest difference with the hi-hat, looks like they spent probably the most time on this because they say it's the world's first active magnetic stand-mounted controller. So hopefully the positional sensing is a lot better than before, because that's probably the biggest complaint people have had about the hi-hats. Now in the playing videos that Alesis released, you couldn't really tell because none of the videos really could show any of how articulate you could be with playing the hi-hat or any of the pads. I'm sure those are going to flood the internet over the next couple of days now that the embargo has been lifted. The other thing with the cymbals is they mount on regular cymbal stands now, so they will swing in a natural way instead of feeling like you're hitting a brick. All right, so to sum up, the biggest difference is the module is all new. It's driven by a BFD sound engine, which means the sounds are going to be great. And it also means they're going to be able to add tons of different expansion packs, which is cool. Hopefully the pad triggering technology is better. It does say it is, but until I can crack one of these things open and look at it, you just ain't gonna know. The cymbals do look much better than before. What I didn't like about my Strike Pro ones is the big black knob they had at the top that had the anti-spin thingy fin on it, and it never really worked right. They would still spin anyway, but getting more of a natural feel with the cymbals actually is pretty good as well. All right, let's close this off with the gigantic elephant in the room, and that is price. This thing is $5,000 here in Canada. Sure, that's like 30 cents American or 25 cents in euros, but that's freaking expensive. I mean, you're approaching TD27 territory. This is the new TD27. Yes, you're getting a tiny kick pad. Yes, you do have to buy a snare stand, whereas you do get a snare stand with the Strata kit. You get less pads, but you do get a digital snare, digital hi-hat, digital ride, arguably a module that has the same, if not more features. But like I said earlier, I'm not a fan of the Roland sounds. I don't think they sound anywhere close to as good as the competitors out there. But then you've got the quality debate to worry about. Would you rather spend $100 less on this kit and get something that's arguably going to last longer, just given what the quality problems Alesis have had? So I think this Strata needs to be $500 to $600 less. I mean, if you even look at this compared to the Strike Pro SE, it's almost $1,600 more than the Strike Pro SE. Now, there's no word on whether or not they're going to do upgrade bundles or if you can buy the module individually. I know when they released the Strike Pro, it took them a few years, but then eventually they said you can buy the module by itself, so maybe you can kind of piecemeal upgrade your Strike Pro SE kit over time. But $1,600 more, I'm not sure that's worth it. You're also getting into F-Note territory. Now, I did price an F-Note with the only Canadian dealer who imports them, and the F-Note 3, which is the acoustic-looking kit, he quoted me $3,600 to $3,700. So for $1,200 less, yes, you're getting less cymbals and pads, but you're getting an acoustic-looking kit with a fantastic module with the same features, roughly, as the Alesis one. That $5,000 makes it a very, very tough sell for me. So let's just check this in US dollars, because I know I do get lots of traffic from folks in the US. $34.99 at Sweetwater, and the F-Note 5X is only a few $100 more. This is a no-brainer for me. If I was going to spend that much money on a kit, it would be the 5X, no question, because, I mean, just look at it. You get an acoustic-looking kit. You get one less drum pad. You arguably get a better sounding module, depending on how you're looking at it. Now, the module on the on the Strata does look a little bit better, but I'm going to stop talking about this because I think price is going to be a big problem with this kit, especially with how they were plagued by all those early quality problems. So hit like and subscribe. As soon as I get my mitts on one of these things, I'll bring it into the studio here and put it through its paces, because I did do a whole pile of Strike videos, got a few 100,000 views on all of those Strike videos. So I'm interested in comparing it to all the stuff that I've done with the Strike Pro before. And don't be too angry if you clicked on this thinking that I already had this kit 30 minutes after it was announced, because I'm not that popular of a YouTuber. But you can change that by hitting like and subscribe. See you next time.